Holy City Center Radio, this is episode 298, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, September 30th, 2024. Yes, it is the last day of September. I hope you had an amazing month as we greet October in just about 24 hours, and we are right in spooky season, which I know a lot of you like, whether it's the pumpkin flavored everything, the Halloween movies and TV shows and specials, or, decorating costumes, all that good stuff. I know a lot of people love this time of year. I always enjoy the fall. The weather, regardless of being down here in South Carolina or where I grew up in Connecticut, I've always enjoyed that weather. A little bit cooler, obviously. Here can still feel quite balmy on some days, but not usually, for the most part, not like it is in July and August, of course. And it was always the start of the school year, when you were a kid, new beginnings, excitement, football season's underway. Hey, good stuff. I do enjoy this time of year, and happy to be back with you on the microphone today as well. So, first of all, I hope everyone got through the storm okay. It seems in Charleston County it went about as expected, which was, not a ton to be super concerned about, but there was a chance of, flooding, flash flooding, pop-up tornadoes. And I know saying like, not too bad when we're talking about a tornado, but the tornadoes that were expected were, if there were going to be any, were going to be similar to last time. We're not talking about those huge, gigantic things you see in the Midwest, in movies like Twister or Twisters now, as the sequel came out. But, obviously still dangerous, but we're not talking on that grand scale. And there were some warnings. I'm sure some of you, like myself, were woken up very early in the morning as your phones were going off. I had a few warnings, one kind of earlier in the evening on Thursday, and then one very early in the morning on Friday. Where there were some, rotations that were coming off of Folly Beach area and might be coming down, on land and moving through James Island. And some did. And there was some talk that, they went through North Charleston or West Ashley or whatever it may be. But it seems, for the most part, in this area, we got out relatively unscathed. There was the typical kind of flooding and, some branches here and there, some trees fell, of course, but it appears from reporting and everything, no injuries here in Charleston area, which is great. Where I live, there actually was a tree that came down and it hit one of the buildings in my complex. Thankfully, not my building. And even more importantly, no one was injured. So very thankful for that. Did cause a little bit of damage to the building it hit, of course, and crews were out by noon on Friday already, getting the tree out of the way and everything, because the weather had gotten good enough for it was a little windy out, but you could be out and about without having to worry about any danger. So that was the closest brush with anything even remotely bad that I had, and it seems that was kind of the same throughout this area. Unfortunately, we saw a much different story in other parts of the state and in other states like Tennessee and North Carolina, where communities are just devastated. And we'll get into that here in a moment. So I hope you're having a good start to your week. Like I said, October just around the corner. And without any further delay, let's get into the news. So as I said, the hurricane/tropical storm Helene, or however you pronounce it, I'm still not 100% sure, didn't do too much damage in this Charleston area. But as I said just a few moments ago, we're not so lucky in other parts of the state or in other states. As of this recording, at least 25 people have died across South Carolina. I was about to say 24 and just got a text alert saying that number had jumped to 25. So just an FYI, that could change by the time you hear this. Let's hope not. But so far, they have reported 25 deaths across South Carolina after the hurricane/tropical storm came through. It's one of the largest storms in decades in terms of how much devastation it caused in the southeastern United States, causing widespread flooding, damaging roads and homes, and left more than 1 million people without power across the southeastern United States. Now, that death toll of 25, has eclipsed the 19 deaths that were caused by the state's historic flooding back in 2015. and it's closing in on the 26 deaths caused by Hurricane Hugo in 1989. So that may be shocking to you. You know about the devastation that Hugo caused, especially in this area, and we didn't even have anything remotely close to a direct hit here in Charleston. But the fact that across the state, we are just, one death shy of what Hugo's devastation did. And, that, of course, was back in '89. We're talking decades ago, where technology and planning, obviously is different than it is now. And so very sad that that has happened, and it was somewhat shocking. I was expecting stories like that from Florida because they just got slammed when it came ashore, but was not expecting the devastation that this storm wreaked on other parts of this state and other states. Very shocking and very sad situation. um, why though those deaths, in most cases, at least in South Carolina, the victims were killed when trees fell on them. So you think of these storms, you're thinking flooding, maybe someone drowned or something like that. But shockingly, it's more from things like trees falling. So just keep that in mind as, storms come in the future. Be very mindful of that. If there's going to be strong winds, possible tornadoes, do what you can to be in a safe space, and away from any tree that could fall. And, if you're in a complex like me where there really is no escaping the handful of trees around, if you have an upstairs downstairs situation, probably best to be downstairs, and away from windows. If a tree is out in that way, what your house is like and what's around it, or your apartment or whatever. Um, so yes, in addition to deaths, just other devastation as far as property and everything. It took some time, obviously, because a lot of people lost power, including internet, and cell phones. So there wasn't a lot of like pictures and videos and news coming out like on places like social media. Even some news stations in other parts of the state were without power. So very devastating. Seeing those videos and photos now that power is starting to be restored, just entire areas just wiped out. It's shocking. And I definitely, encourage everyone to look for anywhere that is accepting donations. I know the Blood Connection, which is throughout the country, but is really picked up here in the Charleston and South Carolina areas as far as a company where you can donate blood. They're asking for help with that. Of course, there's places like Red Cross where you can donate to, and I'm sure there's plenty of GoFundMe's for individual families and people who need help. So be sure to look into it because there's a lot of people who are going to need a lot of assistance after that storm. So we had the 25 deaths here in South Carolina. And across the Southeast, that total is 44 people. That's according to the Associated Press. That number may have changed as well by the time you hear this. Now, the storm, as I mentioned, not only hit South Carolina, but caused a lot of damage in Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, and parts of Tennessee. So those are really the places that just are dealing with a lot of devastation right now. And again, I encourage you to look out and look for places where you can donate or help folks out because they're certainly going to need it. All right, switching gears. Here's an update on that sweet grass vodka situation. Those who don't remember, there was a lot of accusations against the owner of, inflating how much the business was actually worth, bilking people out of money, et cetera, before everything just kind of collapsed on the business. Well, now in a twist of irony, the owner of Sweetgrass Vodka, Jared Swanger, is accusing others of doing what he's been accused of. So while he was deflecting investors who were, trying to find out when they're going to get money back, people who had already given him money, like, hey, we were supposed to have a payment back by this time, or, where's money from creditors and debtors and things like, or creditors, yeah, and he kept telling them the money's on the way, and the money never came. Well, he's accusing someone of doing that exact same thing. Actually, a few people. On September 13th, his company, which the parent company name is known as Might Be Hungover, sued a mix of 9 people and shell companies, accusing them of scamming Swanger out of more than $80,000 on a false promise to invest $10 million. As I mentioned, Sweetgrass Vodka, they shuttered in April with these mounting financial problems after just being in business for 3 years. But in this 46-page lawsuit, they are laying much of the blame on a person by the name of Rodney Koch, who is a Las Vegas investor who allegedly failed to deliver, the cash that Swanger needed to keep his business going. Koch is named in two other federal lawsuits, actually, accusing him of nearly identical schemes. Canadian regulators also imposed a 25-year trading ban against him in that country for an investment scam he oversaw. This is according to government documents. So this is by no means something where it looks like Swanger is just flailing and trying to, don't get me wrong, Koch could actually be innocent of these accusations, but given the track record that I just mentioned, there is a very distinct possibility that, yeah, Swanger was a victim as well. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that anything he's accused of, if it turns out that's true, that excuses that behavior, of course. So Swanger alleges he lost $83,400 to Koch in a transaction, and that. But as the Post and Courier mentions, Swanger's debts had already been mounting well before that wire transfer. So this is how he lost that money, according to the lawsuit. They had discussions, Swanger and Koch, about a cash infusion, which began in December 2023. That's when investors led by Koch offered first $5 million, then $10 million, but they had the stipulation that the money must be repaid in 5 years. Swanger agreed, and in turn gave Koch 20% of the company as part of this arrangement. Now, Swanger was also required to pay $83,400 as an insurance fee before Koch's group wired him the money. Swanger, according to the lawsuit, handed those funds over on December 20th, and then that's when the stalling started on Koch's end. Swanger repeatedly asked for the cash, saying he needed short-term capital, but Koch failed to deliver all the time, promising the money is on the way. This is all according to the lawsuit. As that wait continued into the new year, Swanger's company took out two short-term loans to cover his bills. One loan was $100,000 at 12% interest, which was due March 24th. A second for $90,000, which had interest accruing at $1,500 a day, the lawsuit stated. By April, there was still no cash from Koch. Swanger's company couldn't repay those loans I just mentioned or follow through on some other deposits made, regarding the business and some other transactions. And that's when things really, really started to collapse, as I mentioned, and the business was forced to close and all these accusations against Swanger mounted. So basically, he was thinking he was going to get a huge investment, which the company obviously needed as debts were mounting. And first, he had to pay this insurance fee, and that was supposed to, after that was done, it was supposed to lead to this cash coming in, and Swanger's alleging it never did. So an interesting twist. It's been a long time, since the story came out, that we've had updates from Swanger's end. And of course, you may remember the family was going through a tragedy as well, in addition to dealing with whatever was going on with the business. And this is the first time that, we've sort of heard from his side. There's been little things here and there from lawyers and whatnot, but very interesting to see that the stuff he's being accused of, he's accusing others of doing the same to him. And it makes you wonder, yeah, his debts were mounting, but like if he had gotten this cash infusion, would that have changed things around and, not led to him making promises that he couldn't keep? Now, again, that doesn't excuse what he did, but it's just curious to know how this whole thing might have played out differently. So we'll keep an eye on this, just like the story in general, and I'll let you know if there's any updates. And the final update from this weekend, you may remember that. Now, I'm sure you remember the story of the Titan submersible that was going down to the wreck of the Titanic and had a catastrophic implosion, which led to the deaths of everyone on board. I'm sure you remember that story. But did you remember when I mentioned this previously, that they were going to have the hearings here in the Charleston area, which was really interesting. There was really no tie to Charleston, but the Coast Guard decided to host the investigative hearings here. Well, after about 2 weeks, it is wrapped. The whole point of the hearings was to try to find out why this experimental submersible imploded with the 5 people on board. And for 2 weeks, as I said, the Coast Guard investigators heard testimony from people like deep sea diving experts and former company employees, managers, and even some of the founders of OceanGate, which is the company that sent the Titan to the Atlantic to see the Titanic, excuse me, several times successfully between 2021 and 2023 until that horrific disaster in June of 2023. Now, you can go and look into details of each day's testimony, but I didn't think anything really shocking or revelatory came out of the hearings. It was kind of what we have been told and expected. It's that Ocean Gate and its co-founder Stockton Rush, who was one of the people on board the submersible when it imploded, either ignored warning signs, in the pursuit of short-term profits, or were just blinded by its pursuit of pushing the boundaries of what could be achieved, and just making this trip to the Titanic, and having this, like, instead of just companies and explorers going down there, they're making like trying to make a tourist industry out of this. And those two things were constant themes throughout the testimony. And again, I think we all kind of assume that based on previous reports in the media and things. It was pretty clear that they ignored warning signs, and just blindly moved forward, thinking that they knew better, and we just got to make this money, and we don't need to jump through these regulatory loopholes and make sure everything is as safe as they say. They go overboard, just attitudes like that. So that's really the gist of it. I wanted to provide an update in case you hadn't been paying attention to it or forgotten about it. But like I said, nothing really shocking or revelatory, or really anything that's going to change the narrative that was already out there. It certainly seems that what we all kind of assumed is exactly what was the case. So I do, though, however, encourage you to visit either the link in the show notes, or just Google the hearings. If there's something specific you want to see, you may find some of it interesting. Just hearing some background about the company and how things specifically went wrong, instead of just we know vaguely that they did and why. So I just didn't feel it was necessary to really do a deep dive, no pun intended, into the story, since it's basically what everyone assumed it was going to be. And with that, we'll wrap up this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week and an amazing month of October ahead of you. Big thanks to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And a big thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. Thank you all for listening. If you can, rate, review, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. That helps get this podcast out to more folks. We'll be back this week, hopefully on Wednesday, barring any crazy change of plans. I'm not anticipating any, but you never know. So should be back on Wednesday as normal, and of course Friday as well. Until then, though, good night and good luck.